Hi, my name is Ingrid Finger, and together with Elena Ortiz Preuss, we are coordinating a symposium called Bilingual and Multilingual Language Processing at ISAPL. So, over the past 3 decades, the study of bilingual and multilingual language processing has moved from the margins to the center of contemporary psycholinguistic research. Once viewed as exceptional or peripheral, bilingual speakers are now recognized as providing critical insight into the fundamental architecture of the human language system. Converging evidence from behavioral experiments, eye tracking, electrophysiology, and neuroimaging has reshaped our understanding of how multiple languages are represented, accessed, and controlled. A central and robust finding across this body of research is that bilingual language processing is characterized by coactivation, which means both languages are activated in parallel, even only one language is contextually relevant. Crucially, bilingual and multilingual processing is not uniform. It's shaped by experience-dependent factors. Proficiency, age of acquisition, frequency of use, language dominance, social linguistic context all modulate the degree and nature of cross-language activation. The symposium brings together leading scholars investigating bilingual, multilingual processing, cross-modalities, populations, and methodologies. By integrating evidence from lexical access, syntactic processing, predictive mechanisms, and cognitive control, we aim to advance a comprehensive account of how multiple languages coexist within a single cognitive architecture. Thank you. So my name is Ingrid Finger, and I'm presenting this oral communication called The Diversity of Linguistic Experience and Language Regulation in the Bilingual Mind. And this is a joint work with Pedro Mario da Silva and Judy Crow from the University of California, Irvine. Let me see if I can pass my slides here. So how do bilinguals juggle two languages? We know that both languages are co-activated when we are producing language, and we've known that for quite some time. And we also know that bilinguals negotiate this competition through language regulation or language control. So the adaptive control hypothesis by Green and Abutalebi predict the ways cognitive resources are recruited during language processing are largely shaped by their social environments. So it makes sense to look at social environments in which bilinguals are immersed in order to understand the mechanisms that regulate language control. Bilinguals who speak the same two languages but live in different interactional contexts may experience different environmental demands that shape their cognitive and linguistic processes. So Abutalebi and Green predict that single language context, dual language context, and dense code switching context pose different demands for language regulation. So if you are bilingual and you are immersed in single language context, for instance, if you use one language at home and one language at work or at school, for instance, languages are totally separate. Even though you are a bilingual person, the languages are separated. They are used in separate contexts, which means that there is less need for control. Dual language contexts and dense code switching contexts, on the other hand, are contexts in which there is more need for language regulation, depending on how intense your communication or interaction with speakers of other languages are. So our main claim is that heritage speakers regulate the co-activation of their two languages in ways that are different from other bilinguals. These differences emerge across multiple levels of language production and are shaped by their unique language experiences. So our investigation, our focus is on what role does the linguistic environment or interactional context play in the bilingual mind and brain. And in the study, we tested 3 different contexts. So we tested heritage speakers, language regulation, comparison to other bilingual groups. So instead of just considering everyone bilingual, we separated bilinguals into different groups depending on language use. So first we looked at the heritage speakers of English, heritage Spanish speakers who were English bilinguals. We had 49 participants who live in California. So these participants are bilinguals who learned Spanish at home, and that was their first language, but then eventually they became English dominant because living in California, they ended up becoming English dominant. At the same time, they have plenty of opportunities to code switch. They code switch all the time because they live at home, they have a close contact with their family. So even though they're dominant in English, their use of Spanish is very, very intense. The other group of bilinguals that we tested are international students at UCI. So they're Mandarin English bilinguals. They live in California, but they are international students, and they are late bilinguals because they came to the United States to study at university. They are more Mandarin proficient, but they are immersed in English, right? Even though they kept Mandarin, they are still immersed in English, and they have learned English at a later age. And we had 61 participants for that. The third group is Portuguese English bilinguals who live in Brazil. They are also late bilinguals, which means they have learned English after their Portuguese system was very consolidated, and they live in a monolingual context. They live in Brazil. They speak English. They watch series. They have some contact. Some of them have a lot of contact. They have different levels of proficiency, but they are still dominant in Portuguese, and this is the context in which they use languages totally separate. Right? There is no dense code switching. There is no need for juggling the 2 languages in the same way that people who are immersed in English in environments need. So our study design contain 2 sessions with several different tasks. So we had the questionnaire, the bilingual language profile, and brokering background. We also had verbal fluency to decide on language dominance, and we had a picture description in which we are going to analyze speech connectedness. And today I'm going to bring the results for the picture naming and AXCPT only. But they also did elicited imitation tests. So it's a very large study, and we are now analyzing all this data. So in the battery of tasks, we can see some of the examples: the bilingual language profile from Birdsong, the semantic verbal fluency, and the elicited imitation task. We also have used a very interesting brokering questionnaire to understand language experience, and we expect the heritage speakers to have a much more intense brokering experience in comparison with the other participants. We also had a picture description for which we're going to analyze using speech graphs. And these are the 2 tasks that I'm going to be talking about today, which is the picture naming, so lexical production task, and the EXCPT, which is a cognitive control assessment. So for this, for these tasks these 2 tasks are the ones that we used with a control context in session 2. So some of the participants did picture naming first and then AXCPT. Some of the participants did AXCPT and then picture naming first. And we wanted to see the effects of training in that. So first, let's talk about entropy. So what we found is that regarding the entropy score, the heritage bilinguals here in orange showed the most balanced language use between the two groups, right? With the family group showing the highest entropy, which may suggest that linguistic mixing or diversity depends more on the community than on other contexts for the heritage speakers, right? As expected, the Brazilian and the Mandarin participants did not have, a lot of entropy in the family context. The Brazilians speak English mainly in the study or work context, right? So they do differ in their language use. So we investigated whether there was some effect of cognitive training because we manipulated the order of the tasks. So as I said, some of the participants did AXPT and then they did picture naming, and some of the participants did picture naming first and then AXPT. Picture naming had 3 different conditions. It's a lexical production task, but they had language mixing and they had language blocks and mixed conditions, right? So we manipulated the order in which participants were exposed to the text with the purpose of assessing whether environmental demands, in case of the tasks, the environmental demands to switch languages may train regulatory mechanisms involving bilingual speech production. As a proxy of second language immersion or code switching experience, right? And then we asked whether we can induce training effects on cognitive control by imposing switching demands within a single experimental session, right? And the results are very, very interesting. So what we found, the BSI scores by study group are the results which reveal if they go above 0, they're proactive. If they're below 0, they are more reactive, right? And what we found is that across 3 groups, the Brazilian, the Heritage, and the Mandarin, there are training effects for those who mix languages before a CPT. So we found a training effect. And we also found that the heritage speakers are the one who show the least amount of training. So we can see here, so the red ones are the ones who did AXPT first, and the blue ones are the ones who did picture naming first, right? So Brazilian participants who did AXPT first had a very different behavior in terms of showing proactive control than the ones who did picture naming first. So picture naming affected their proactive control behavior. The same happened with Mandarin speakers. So there is a huge training effect, right? So Mandarin were basically reactive in the AXPT first, but then when they received the Mandarin speakers, when they received picture naming first, there was a training effect. The heritage group, on the other hand, they show the least amount of training, right? In comparison to the other 2. So what we can see is that these regulatory mechanisms involved in bilingual speech production are highly adaptive to the demands of the environment. So what do these preliminary data suggest to us? Our hypothesis is that speakers of heritage languages may be adopting a sort of an open control mode, which describes a state of linguistic cooperation in which bilingual speakers activate both languages simultaneously during code switching, resulting in lower cognitive processing costs during switching than in competitive mode, which does not depend on inhibition, a behavior that has been observed in communities where languages are deeply connected. In other words, our results reveal the dynamic and adaptive nature of the bilingual experience and suggest that the diversity of linguistic experience has consequences for bilingual cognition. These are, here are our references, and thank you.
Artificial intelligence and the multilingual world between technological progress and digital colonization by Dr. Jacques Coulard-Deau and Dr. Mohammed Mehajul Islam. The rapid development of artificial intelligence has transformed the global technological landscape within only a few years. Large language models, automated translation systems, predictive algorithm, and generative AI are now becoming central to education, communication, administration, research, and economic production. Yet, behind this technological acceleration lies a major question that remains insufficiently explored. Can artificial intelligence genuinely function in a multilingual world without reinforcing new forms of linguistic domination? Only between 6 and 12 languages can realistically accumulate the approximately 3 trillion data points required for frontier-scale large language models. The remaining 7,500 languages, most of them spoken across the global south, lack the digitized corpora, computational infrastructure, and institutional support necessary to build autonomous AI systems. According to UNESCO 2025, more than 2,500 languages are currently endangered worldwide, of which 576 are critically endangered. In Africa alone, approximately 2,000 languages have no meaningful AI support whatsoever. This question becomes particularly urgent for the global south, where linguistic diversity is not an exception but the normal condition of social life. Thousands of languages continue to exist across Asia, Africa, and Latin America, often within multilingual societies where several languages, dialects, and religious traditions coexist simultaneously. Modern AI systems, however, are largely concentrated around a very small number of dominant languages, supported by massive quantities of digital data. This imbalance raises the possibility that AI may unintentionally create a new form of digital hierarchy, with thousands of minority languages reduced to translated extensions of the new dominant ones. The problem is not simply technological, it is also cultural, linguistic, philosophical, and civilizational. The structural imbalance of AI. Current frontier-scale AI systems depend upon enormous quantities of linguistic material. The most powerful models are trained on vast digital corpora containing books, websites, archives, videos, academic materials, social media interaction, and institutional documents. Only a limited number of languages possess such extensive digitized ecosystems. English occupies a uniquely dominant position. followed by a relatively small group of globally influential languages such as Chinese, Spanish, French, Arabic, and Russian. A detailed analysis of OpenAI's GPT-3 training corpus reveals English constitutes 92.65% of the training data, French 1.82%, German 1.47%, and all other 100 plus languages only 1.90%. More recent surveys confirm that 70 to 80% of training corpora remain English dominated. UREC Alert, Higher Education Press, 2025. As a consequence, minority languages increasingly depend on translation-based integration into larger linguistic systems. This process may appear inclusive at first sight, since AI translation gives access to digital tools and global communication. Yet, a language integrated into a dominant AI environment is no longer functioning entirely according to its own semantic logic, cultural memory, or grammatical architecture. It becomes partially reinterpreted through the structures of the host language. A 2025 benchmark report from the Mohammed bin Zayed University of Artificial Intelligence assessed major LLMs on non-English languages and found dramatic accuracy drops compared to English. Chinese, Mandarin, approximately 60%, Arabic 69%, and Spanish 50%. These numbers mean that an Arabic speaker using an AI system today receives answers that are nearly 70% less reliable than those received by an English speaker. This is a structural feature of how current AI is built. Digital colonization, a historical continuity. This is where the concept of digital colonization becomes relevant. Historically, colonial systems often imposed administrative, educational, and linguistic hierarchies upon conquered populations. In a digital age, linguistic domination may emerge not through direct political conquest, but through computational dependence. Languages lacking a large-scale AI infrastructure may gradually lose epistemic autonomy under dominant linguistic intermediaries. We should discuss here the problem of nominal composition and ergativity, the latter wrongly translated by passive by John D. Frozell, UCLA, and Martin Haspermath, Max Planck Institute, Leipzig. Translation itself is not neutral. Every language organizes reality differently. Grammatical structures, conceptual associations, metaphorical systems, temporal organization, and semantic AI systems trained primarily on dominantly English linguistic structures may therefore reduce or reinterpret features they do not fit their statistical expectations. The challenge of non-Indo-European structures. Besides ergativity, we have already mentioned, other languages depend heavily upon agglutination, where multiple morphemes combine into single words. Tonal distinction, where pitch changes meaning, or highly flexible word order. Some languages encode social hierarchy, gender relations, or spiritual concepts directly within grammar itself. In such cases, translation into a dominant AI framework would flatten important conceptual distinctions. We should discuss here the passive, which is by some considered as a translation of ergativity, which it is not. Even apparently simple linguistic constructions illustrate the difficulty. Word order, qualification patterns, compound formation, or stress placement may carry meanings that cannot easily be transferred. Imagine the reaction of the French. Imagine the reaction if the French president concluded a direct address to the people of France with the typical American formula, Dieu bénisse la France. Multilingual civilization, Arabic, Islam, Buddhism. The issue becomes even more complex in multilingual civilization, where language is deeply connected to religion, identity, and historical continuity. The Arabic-speaking world offers an important example. Everyday Arabic exists through numerous regional dialects that differ significantly across countries: Egyptian, Levantine, Maghrebi, and Gulf. Sometimes to the point of mutual unintelligibility. At the same time, classical or Quranic Arabic occupies a unique religious and symbolic position. Any AI system operating in this environment must navigate not only linguistic diversity, but also cultural and theological sensitivity. A purely standardized model based on modern standard Arabic alone would fail to reflect the lived multilingual reality of Arabic-speaking societies, as the Technology Innovation Institute in the United Arab Emirates showed in 2025. Comparable questions emerge within the wider Muslim world. Bangladesh, Pakistan, Indonesia, and Malaysia function through Bengali, Urdu, Bahasa Indonesia, Malay, and hundreds of local dialects. Religious knowledge circulates through Arabic, while everyday life unfolds in these vernaculars. Buddhist traditions developed across Sanskrit, Pali, Tibetan, Chinese, Japanese, Thai, Burmese, and Sinhala. AI systems designed with simplified monolingual assumptions may struggle to represent these overlapping intellectual traditions accurately. The limitations extend to Africa as well, which achieves a BLEU, bilingual evaluation understudy, of around 30% for most African languages, far below the standard of native level translation, which typically exceeds 60 to 70%. Meta AI 2022, Nature 2025. Note that even these 60-70% are not particularly good. China, the most significant contemporary case. The Chinese state has recently accelerated the integration of AI into education and public life, including the introduction of AI-related learning at the very early educational levels, according to some reports mentioning as young as 6-year-olds. China has also reportedly developed AI systems that require less sophisticated digital infrastructure and consume significantly less energy, making them cheaper and more sustainable through heavy investment in nuclear, solar, and wind power. China views AI as a strategic civilizational project. Yet, what does it mean to introduce AI at all school levels in a multilingual and multidialectal civilization like China? Millions of Chinese children speak regional languages or dialects at home, such as Cantonese, Hokkien, Shanghainese, or minority languages like Uyghur, Tibetan, or Mongolian. When these children enter school and encounter AI-powered educational tools trained primarily on standard Mandarin, their home languages become invisible, statistically marginal, and pedagogically absent. This is not necessarily intentional colonization, but the effect is similar. Children learn that their first languages have no place inside the digital future. Over a generation, language shift will accelerate. The very diversity that makes human civilization rich might be sacrificed to computational efficiency. How does China deal with the problem? The possible futures: either the international research community begins working urgently on these assumptions, creating genuinely multilingual, multidialectal, and multi-civilizational AI architectures, or we accept that by technical diktat all digital AI in the world shall work with only 6 to 12 languages. Why not English alone, or Chinese, or Arabic? The choice would not be democratic. It would be determined by whoever controls the largest data centers and the most advanced models. Conclusion: Fanon's warning. This entire situation sounds like Frantz Fanon's black skin, white masks. In the colonial era, a person of color had to wear a white mask to be accepted. In the digital age, a minority language must wear the grammatical and conceptual mask of a dominant language to be processed by AI. The mask is not made of cloth or plastic. It is made of statistical probability, training data, and optimization functions. The central question is therefore no longer whether artificial intelligence can become more powerful. The deeper question is whether humanity can construct forms of AI that remain compatible with the plurality of human cultures, languages, and civilizations. If this challenge is ignored, technological progress may gradually produce a world in which linguistic efficiency replaces linguistic diversity. Thousands of languages could remain socially alive while becoming digitally marginal, dependent, or semantically transformed inside larger computational empires. The debate surrounding multilingual AI is therefore not secondary to the future of technology. It stands at the very center of the relationship between human civilization and the digital age. I would propose here a conclusion in the form of a musical outro. Black skin, singular. One drop of black blood makes your skin black. White masks, plural, because among whites you can have some variety from blonde to fair skin, or even a whiter shade of pale, as Procol Harum looked and sounded so romantic when singing that song. That's where digital colonialism starts. And Frantz Fanon would say it is inescapable to have new anti-colonial wars, the Butlerian jihad of Frank Herbert. Procol Harum tells us about the conquistador in the most naive way possible. And as the gloom begins to fall, I see there is no aureole, though you came with sword held high, you did not conquer, only die. Good afternoon.
Well, thank you so much. Good morning. I would like to begin by expressing my sincere gratitude to the chair of the 13th Congress, Professor Juliana Novo Gomes, as well as to the event organizing and scientific committees. I would also like to thank the symposium organizers, Professor Elena Ortiz and Professor Ingrid Finger, for bringing together this important discussion. And of course, I would like to thank all participants of the Congress who are watching it right now. I'm Pietra Taros from PUC in Brazil. My advisor is Professor Dr. Aline Feide Azevedo, and today I'm pleased to present our oral communication entitled Neurocorrelates of Phonological Awareness and Language Lateralization in Bilingual Children, Portuguese English, an F-NERS study. I would like to start with some background regarding bilingual education in Brazil. So English is mandatory in lower secondary school education, but not in primary education, according to BNCC, which is the national basis for education, which means that children are not necessarily enrolled in English-related activities until they reach the secondary education level. Also, growing demand for additional language exposure has increased interest in bilingual schools in Brazil. Parents and families have been studying more about bilingualism, and they want their kids um, to grow up as bilinguals. The most common pairing for bilingual schools in Brazil is Portuguese and English. So, of course, Portuguese as their mother language and English as their additional or second language. But we can also see different settings, such as Portuguese and German, especially in the south of Brazil, or Portuguese and French, or Portuguese and Tupi, which is a native language in the country. Um, so, what we have is we do have bilingual schools, and the interest in them has been increasing a lot. Some key concepts that will matter for this presentation are: first of all, let's touch the ground in here. Biliteracy is here understood as the ability to read and write in more than one language. And because of this, it requires balanced, continuous literacy practices in both languages. It's not only about having classes of English, but in English as a tool to achieve other goals and to read the world through other languages' lenses. Another key concept is phonological awareness, which is the possibility, the ability of recognizing and manipulating sound structures, such as syllables, rhymes, and phonemes. Phonological awareness is a key predictor of literacy, which means that if the child has a good ability of manipulating these structures, literacy is on its way for the success. Also, quickly talking about cross-language transfer, which says that metalinguistic skills are transferable between languages. We know about this in different fields. Phonetics has shown this, semantics as well, and so forth. Which means that not only a second language has some gifts, some details that come from the first language, but also the other way around for sure. When it comes to the neuroscience rationale, I would like to bring up the executive functions that are especially related to the frontal lobe in the brain. When we study neurolinguistics, we know that the frontal lobe is responsible for executive functions, and according to Diamond, they are divided in three. We have the working memory, which is the ability required um, to bring part in processes. So I have to remember the previous steps in order to achieve my goals. Also, we have the inhibitory control. It's the power of avoidance, power of saying no to what is not relevant or what is not adequate in a specific situation. And cognitive flexibility, which is better summarized as, okay, I have a problem. What will I do to solve it in the most efficient way? Bilinguals seem to be very good in all of them. Monolinguals typically show, because now we are talking also about the brain and the hemisphere related to language. Monolinguals typically show strong left hemisphere dominance for language processing. This is no new data. Previous research has also expressed English letterization in the brain as a matter of handedness. So we know that basically 90% of the right-handed people and 70% of the left-handed people tend to have language as primarily being solved, their matters being solved in the left hemisphere of the brain. But bilinguals seem to exhibit more distributed and bilateral activation patterns. So apparently there is a broader neural recruitment. About executive control, both classical language areas and executive control regions are recruited, indicating increased neural flexibility. We cannot deny that bilingual people need to fight avoidance at times. So inhibitory control, the competition between languages. Right now, I am speaking in English. I'm Brazilian. Portuguese is my mother tongue. I speak other languages, and I have the urge of saying no to every word and explanation that comes to my mind in another language in order to give you proper information in the language I decided to submit this paper. Also, flexibility seems to be greater in bilingual people because I have this problem. Things are coming up in another language. What can I do to solve it? As well as recognizing patterns in the second language. Knowing about this, we are led to the research objectives. The main question of this research is, do bilingual children differ from their monolingual peers in phonological processing and brain organization? Is it different to be a bilingual child, or to be a monolingual child when it comes to phonological processing and neural activation? We split this main question in three sub-objectives, three specific objectives. The first one is related to phonological awareness itself. So we aim to assess whether bilingual school students show higher phonological awareness in Portuguese than peers in regular schools due to enhanced metalinguistic sensitivity. What we have in here is children who are enrolled in bilingual schools have brighter contact with phonological matters because they have the Portuguese phonology on their daily lives, but also the English, the second language, phonological systems involved. Meanwhile, monolingual children or children who are not enrolled in bilingual schools usually tend not to have such um, conflict when it comes to phonological access. What we have here is a question. When it comes to the mother tongue, do bilingual children show greater scores, show greater results? Which means if I have access and if I keep in touch with more than one phonological systems, do I get better on my own, on my mother tongue's phonological system? The second specific objective is related to hemispheric lateralization of language in the brain. We aim to examine lateralization patterns, hypothesizing that bilingual children exhibit more bilateral neural organization for language. Previous research has mainly talked about adults. Let's see what we can find in here and if bilingual children or children enrolled in bilingual schools, in fact, express greater bilateralization of language in the brain. And the third specific objective is related to the neural activation patterns. We aim to investigate whether bilingual children recruit language related neural networks more extensively than monolingual children. It's important to say that it is there might be bilingual children in the non-enrolled in bilingual schools group, which would be the control group. But even with language courses once a week, the literacy seems to be different because in children enrolled in bilingual schools, they have at times financial education classes in English, road debates in English, math, science, and other subjects in English as well. So it is hard to compare the input these children get from regular language teaching. To answer the aforementioned questions, our method includes participants which are children aged between 6 and 10 years old, which are in their literacy process. And of course, age matters, so this is a variable considering semestral ages. We have our experimental group, which are children enrolled in bilingual schools, specifically Portuguese English ones, and the control group, which are children enrolled in regular schools. Other variables which will be taken into account are handedness, which will be measured through the Edinburgh Inventory, language experience through the LEAP questionnaire, and nonverbal IQ through Raven test. Participants will also go through a behavioral task. They will answer the Adapted Bilingual Metaphonological Assessment Battery, also known as BUMBI, to measure their phonological awareness in the levels of phonemes and syllables in their mother tongue. And performance will be measured by accuracy on phonological tasks. And then we have the brain imaging during data collection. Children will answer these questionnaires, this Edinburgh inventory, Raven test, and so on, and Bumby. And then they will have FNIRS capturing of their neuroactivation while a digit span task is carried out with them. FNIRS is the functional near-infrared spectroscopy. It's basically the system that is shown in the picture. We use optodes and an optode cap with the participants in order to emit near-infrared light. And due to the collect data, we can see the oxygenated hemoglobin that is going through the most cortical parts of the brain, and infer what is possible about brain activation, neuroactivation. The digit span task is that one in which the students, the participants, hear numbers in a certain order, and they must either say the same order forward or backwards. Digit span task is used to assess the verbal memory capacity, which relies on the phonological loop. So, previous research has shown similarities among the scores in digispan tasks and phonological awareness tasks. The focus is on measuring oxygenated and deoxygenated hemoglobin changes. fMRI tasks usually rely on the bold signal, and this is basically what we do here. We do the math to ensure that the total hemoglobin is also correct. And thanks to that, we can talk about hemispheric lateralization and the bilateral neural activation of children's brain to answer the questions which are related to our main objective and the specific ones. This image sums up a little bit of what FNIRS does. The optodes are divided in two types. The first group is the group of the sources, the emitters of near infrared light. Meanwhile, the second one is the group of the detectors of the near infrared light, and they get to this banana shape on the brain to measure what is more superficial in terms of distance to the core of the brain. Then we apply specific math regarding a law to perfectly define the intensity and concentration to get the hemodynamic response. Of course, we must avoid all the noise that physiological matters can provide. And we do this while children are responding to a specific stimulus or stimuli, in this case, the digit span task. The analysis plan of the data includes a multiple linear regression to predict phonological awareness. FNIRS being preprocessed to remove physiological noise, as I had said, and behavioral plus neural data will be integrated for a comprehensive view. So the inferences will take both approaches into account. About the results, data collection is currently in progress. Part of the data analysis and processing will be further developed based on training and methodologies to be acquired at the University of Connecticut in the USA. So I'm leaving soon, thanks to campus as well, to learn more and give proper information about the data. And this international collaboration is expected to significantly enhance the quality and depth of the final results. I believe it is worth taking notes of the expected contributions. So, when it comes to the bilingual language development, it aims to clarify how early bilingual experience shapes phonological skills and metalinguistic sensitivity. Also, about cognitive neuroscience, we hope to elucidate how bilingualism affects brain organization, hemispheric lateralization, and neural flexibility. At last, but of course not least, the educational psychology. We hope to provide evidence on the cognitive benefits of bilingual schooling from early childhood for literacy. I would also like to thank Neuroeducation Technology Laboratory at Brain Institute in Porto Alegre, Rio Grande do Sul, which is related to PUC, the university where we come from. This is our study group where we run research, debate over previous investigations, and where we learn how to collect data and understand mainly data better. Those are the references we have used. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Gianni Blanchi-Benchi. I'm a postdoc at University Zucourt here in Germany and also a professor at Federal Institute of Rio Grande do Sul in the city of Rolante in Brazil. Today I'm going to present part of my doctoral study that was conducted by Professor Dr. Lilian Christine Ubner from Catholic University of Rio Grande do Sul, PUC-RS, and she also holds a productive scholarship of CNPq. So the title of my presentation is Metacognition, Reading and Executive Functions, Interconnected Study with University Students. So my work is grounded into three main concepts, which are metacognition, that was labeled by American psychologist Flavel, that is cognition about a cognitive phenomenon. So here is represented by an image of a brain thinking about a brain. So when we think about our own cognitive processes. The second construct is reading. There is a cognitive process in which we can have metacognitive skills and strategies of reading in L1 and L2. So here we also focus on in bilingual reading. And the third construct is executive functions. There is a set of cognitive processes like working memory, executive functions, and cognitive and inhibition. So these are the three executive functions that we have tested in our work. And they relate to monitoring and information processing. So about our method, we want to investigate which are the factors that has the greatest influence in metacognition in L1 reading. If it was reading proficiency in L1 in L2 or executive functions performance. And metacognition in L1 reading was assessed in terms of metacognitive awareness of reading strategies and metacognitive strategy use. So about the design of our method, we have some inclusion criteria for participant selection, and one of them was bilingualism, in which the bilingual groups were supposed to have equal or greater score than 75% of accuracy, and monolinguals 25% or less. So it happened in a Michigan test and also in a test of PUC-RS. And also we have another criteria that students were supposed to not have any previous schooling, so they could not have a previous graduation. Group distribution. So in the total, we have tested 247 students, university students, in several universities, and our sample, the final sample, was constituted of 55 students. So we have 4 mutually exclusive groups in which the first group was made of 19 proficient readers in Portuguese and English. So here we have also the acronyms of these groups. And the second group was considered of 23 non-proficient readers in both languages. The third group, 9 proficient readers in Portuguese. And the fourth group, 3 proficient readers in English, but not proficient in Portuguese. So our instruments. Students were assessed through the Michigan test, a sample part, and the reading part. Also by a Brazilian Portuguese reading test of PUC-RS. They have also done the socioeconomic status questionnaire, a reading habits and bilingualism survey, an instrument of reading comprehension and evaluation of strategies that was made by me, and I'm going to explain soon. A metacognitive awareness of reading strategies inventory in L1 Portuguese. This is a self-Likert scale made of 30 statements about the reading process, in which students were supposed to mark their choice in terms of frequency, from never to always. And then these last three instruments were instruments to assess executive functions, which were digital span, trail making test, and word span. Here we have our instrument of reading comprehension and evaluation of strategies. This instrument was evaluated by 4 judges, 2 judges from the language area and 2 other judges from other areas. So basically it's constituted by a text which is divided into paragraphs. In each paragraph the student was supposed to read, and after he or she was supposed to report their thoughts and actions while reading. When they finish it, then they do the second part of the instrument that was composed by questions. These questions were about thesis, main objective of the text, the most important ideas for the thesis, analysis of an expression from the text, true and false, a summary, and a reading evaluation. The summary was then after analyzed through the taxonomy of Cahill, 1998, which divided into 4 levels of summaries. From top level, which contains the thesis, then the high, the main ideas, the medium, the secondary ideas, and the last, the details present in the text. After we have here our results, first our results in terms of MARCI, that is the Metacognitive Awareness Inventory of Strategy Use by Mokhtari and Reichert, 2002. So here to the graph, we can see that the bilingual groups got the best results. They got a high index of metacognitive awareness of strategy use. Then we have the second graph that is about strategy use. So the second measure of metacognitive in L1 reading. The strategies that we see in the instruments of the students were analyzed through a taxonomy of Brazilian research from a University of São Paulo. That is Copto Filho, Jolie Cantalice Vendramini, Jolie Santos Marini, and Jolie. So this taxonomy was made of 67 strategies. Then they were divided into 13 categories for statistical reasons. Here in this part we have the correlations. So first the correlation between metacognition in L1 reading and L1 and L2 reading proficiency. So we can see that reading proficiency in L1 correlated with two categories of strategies, reading proficiency in L2 with 1, reading proficiency in L2 correlated with MARCI, and also reading proficiency in L2 with MARCI. So the correlations were moderate in general. Then the second part, we have seen the correlation between metacognition in L1 reading and executive functions. So the category of use of previous knowledge correlated with digital span forwards. Attention to reading aspects, as we can see here, it correlated with digital span forward, backwards, total, and word span, so with more executive functions tests. Rereading of the text correlated with digital span backwards and total, and text-based production correlated with digital span backwards. And MARCI and executive functions did not correlate. So we could see that our main result is that the reading proficiency construct in L1 and L2 showed more impact than executive functions in metacognition in L1 reading. Because, for example, MARCI and executive functions did not correlate. So this fact, that this great impact of reading proficiency on L1 and L2, and also the fact that there is the lack of statistic bilinguals that are not proficient readers in the mother tongue. So we have a really small group of proficient readers in English, but not in Portuguese. What it means that if you are proficient in another language, you will be in your first language also, at least in terms of reading, that what we have tested here. So these two aspects, they can bring the light to the importance of first language reading comprehension skills. Also, we could see before that the attention to reading aspects, these strategies correlated with a lot of executive functions and also with proficiency in L1 and L2. So the presence of significance regarding to use of strategy of attention to reading aspects reinforces, according to some theorists like Dahan and Cohen, that attention is not a simple process. Also, we can see that attention is a primary executive function, because when you read, you have to use your attention a lot, because you should focus on the essential information and also inhibit unnecessary and distracting information. So here are our main references. Thank you for your attention, and here follows also our emails.
Olá a todos, meu nome é Alexandre Alves Santos, da UMass Amherst, e hoje eu vou apresentar o TVLPB, o Teste de Verificação Lexical do Português Brasileiro. Este trabalho foi desenvolvido em colaboração com a Thaís Sá, Luiz Amaral e Ricardo Augusto de Souza. Nessa apresentação eu vou explicar a motivação para a criação do teste, como ele foi desenvolvido, validado e quais resultados obtivemos com falantes nativos e falantes de herança do português brasileiro. Antes de falarmos do TVLPB, é importante entender o VLT, ou o Vocabulary Levels Test, que foi criado por Paul Nation para a língua inglesa. Trata-se de um teste psicométrico que mede a amplitude de vocabulário com base na frequência lexical. A ideia é que palavras mais frequentes são adquiridas primeiro, enquanto palavras menos frequentes tendem a indicar maior proficiência. O VLT foi amplamente utilizado e validado, sendo correlacionado inclusive com medidas de produção oral. Em um artigo publicado em 2012, Hilstein faz um levantamento dos estudos em bilinguismo publicados no Journal of Bilingualism, Language and Cognition, e que usam a proficiência como uma variável independente. Em seu levantamento, o autor verifica que mais de 50% dos estudos averiguados usam a autoavaliação como a principal ou única medida de proficiência linguística. O autor também averigua que, nesses estudos, raramente a variância nos dados obtidos pode ser explicada em função da variável independente. Da mesma forma, há estudos que argumentam que bilíngues, em autoavaliações, não provêm medidas de proficiência ou dominância linguística com precisão, por exemplo, no artigo de Dunn e Foxtree de 2009. Da mesma maneira, Golan et al. 2012 apresentam evidências de que bilíngues conseguem indicar com precisão a sua língua dominante, porém não são bons em autoavaliar a extensão do seu conhecimento nessas línguas. Esse último estudo mostra uma alta correlação entre autoavaliações de dominância linguística e testes objetivos de vocabulário, quando os participantes são considerados pertencentes a diferentes grupos de dominância linguística. Por outro lado, quando considerados como um grupo homogêneo, a correlação entre medidas subjetivas e objetivas desaparece. Em resumo, os autores sugerem que as únicas medidas consistentes nesse estudo, que não perdem a correlação entre si, são as medidas objetivas de proficiência. Esse cenário nos indica que é problemático, ou pelo menos não aconselhável, utilizar medidas de proficiência baseadas em testes subjetivos como variáveis independentes para estudos de processamento da linguagem. Foi justamente nesse contexto que surgiu a necessidade do TVLPB. Até então, não havia um teste validado de amplitude de vocabulário para o português brasileiro. Além disso, testes longos, como o CELP-BRAS, nem sempre são práticos para contextos educacionais ou de pesquisa. Assim, buscamos criar um instrumento confiável, rápido e alinhado ao uso real da língua. Assim, agora eu vou explicar brevemente como o TVLPB foi planejado e validado, desde a seleção lexical até os testes realizados com os participantes. Para desenvolver o TVLPB, utilizamos três corpora: o PTTEM, que é baseado na internet, a Linguateca, com o português escrito, e o Seural, representando a oralidade. Extraímos 5.000 lemas mais frequentes e selecionamos os itens compartilhados entre os corpora. O teste é de múltipla escolha, os participantes devem relacionar as palavras às suas definições. Aqui nós temos um exemplo de um item do teste. O participante vê diferentes palavras e precisa associá-las corretamente às definições apresentadas. Esse formato permite uma aplicação rápida e objetiva, além de facilitar a correção e a análise dos resultados. O teste final possui 78 itens, organizados por classes gramaticais e bandas de frequência lexical. As questões incluem substantivos, verbos e adjetivos, distribuídos progressivamente das palavras mais frequentes às menos frequentes. Essa organização permite avaliar diferentes níveis de domínio lexical. E antes de aplicarmos o teste a falantes de herança, realizamos uma etapa de validação com falantes nativos do português brasileiro. Isso foi importante para verificar se os itens funcionavam adequadamente e se as instruções levavam às respostas esperadas. Os objetivos dessa etapa com os falantes nativos do português eram simples, mas fundamentais. Primeiro, queríamos observar o tempo necessário para completar o teste e verificar se os enunciados conduziam os participantes à resposta correta. O teste foi aplicado online, usando a plataforma Jotform, e tinha duração máxima de 13 minutos. Os itens e opções eram randomizados, embora as bandas de frequência fossem apresentadas progressivamente, do nível mais básico até o nível mais avançado. Participaram dessa etapa 115 falantes nativos do português brasileiro, com diferentes níveis de escolaridade, do ensino médio à pós-graduação. A média de idade foi de 40 anos e o desvio padrão foi de 11 anos. Os resultados mostram uma taxa geral de acerto de aproximadamente 92%, indicando que os itens estavam bem construídos e que havia um claro viés em direção à resposta correta para os falantes nativos do português. Isso sugere que as rúbricas estavam funcionando adequadamente. Quando observamos as bandas individualmente, vemos mais 75% de acerto em todas elas. Além disso, o teste apresentou boa consistência interna, tanto considerando as bandas quanto os itens individualmente, o que reforça sua confiabilidade. De forma geral, concluímos que o tempo limite era adequado para o português brasileiro, ou seja, os 13 minutos, e que os itens conduziam corretamente às respostas esperadas. Com isso, o TVLPB estava pronto para ser aplicado com falantes de português como língua de herança. Na próxima etapa, aplicamos o teste com falantes de herança do português brasileiro para verificar como ele funcionava nesse público específico. Participaram dessa etapa 20 falantes de herança recrutados na Universidade de Massachusetts em Amherst, nos Estados Unidos. Todos eram estudantes universitários matriculados em cursos avançados de português e já tinham alguma experiência prévia com leitura e escrita na língua de herança. Os resultados indicaram que 70% dos participantes conseguiram concluir o teste dentro do tempo estabelecido, enquanto 30% não finalizaram o teste. Ainda assim, o tempo pareceu adequado para a maioria dos participantes. Quanto à precisão por faixa, observamos resultados acima de 75% nas bandas das 1.000 e das 2.000 e 3.000 palavras mais frequentes da língua portuguesa, mas já nas bandas de 4 e 5.000, os acertos foram menores, sugerindo maior dificuldade com vocabulário menos frequente, o que é esperado. Para investigar a validade externa do TVLPB, também realizamos entrevistas orais com os mesmos participantes. Nessas entrevistas, os falantes falaram sobre temas familiares, como experiências pessoais e viagens. As produções foram avaliadas com base em critérios inspirados pelo Common European Framework e o ISAPL. Ao comparar os resultados das entrevistas com as pontuações do TVLPB, encontramos uma correlação moderada, mas estatisticamente significativa. Isso sugere que o desempenho lexical e proficiência oral estão relacionados. Neste gráfico, observamos um agrupamento interessante. Participantes com melhor desempenho no teste de vocabulário também tendem a apresentar melhores resultados na entrevista oral. Isso reforça a validade do instrumento. Podemos observar também um agrupamento no canto superior direito do gráfico. Como na pesquisa de Fairclough 2012, parece que existe um efeito chamado ceiling effect, o que pode ser problemático para pesquisas futuras e significa que as bandas do teste de vocabulário devem ser aumentadas. Nesse mesmo gráfico, também observamos alguns pontos fora da curva, ou seja, outliers, que merecem maior investigação. Esses casos poderiam indicar perfis linguísticos diferentes ou fatores específicos influenciando a relação entre o vocabulário e a oralidade. Em conclusão, os resultados sugerem que o TVLPB possui validade externa e é capaz de diferenciar participantes com níveis distintos de proficiência. O teste parece especialmente útil para discriminar entre os níveis mais altos e os mais baixos de domínio de português. E por fim, aqui estão as referências utilizadas ao longo deste trabalho. Muito obrigado pela sua atenção.